Hi everyone, welcome to Techie World. So today I'm starting the interview series on our channel. In this series, I'll be sharing my interview experiences along with the questions that I faced during the interview. Also, I'll include the question which I asked as an interviewer when I take the interview for my organization. Okay? The main purpose of this series is to help you guys during your interview preparations. So to start with this, today we are going to discuss most asked question about OOPS concept in Java. Okay, so let's straight away jump to the topic. Also, today the questions that I am going to discuss is asked to me in these companies interview. You can have a look like TCS, Luxoft, Infosys, Wipro, Samsung, and HCL. There are other questions compiled already, which I'll be sharing in the due course on this channel only. So let's move to the first question. The first question is, what is OOPS concept? It is a very common question asked in almost all the Java interviews, where interviewer wants to know your view about what is OOPS concept for you in Java. So how to answer that question? Interviewer just want to know your view on the OOPS concept and also what are the four fundamental concept of the OOPS. So you can answer this question this way. The first point that you should mention while answering this question is object-oriented programming is a programming paradigm that is widely used in Java and many other programming languages. Okay. The second point you can say it is a methodology for designing and organizing code based on the concept of objects, right? That is what OOPS is. OOPS is object-oriented programming, means everything is an object. Okay, that's why second point is required. And third point, you can say in Java, OOPS is a fundamental part of the language and it is used for structuring and modeling the software system, right? And then you can say there are four fundamental principle or rather concept of the OOPS in Java. And what are those four? One is encapsulation, inheritance, polymorphism, and abstraction. Okay. And whenever you say these four, it is a probability that the interviewer will pick any of these four and it will they will ask you question about these. Okay, now let's move to the second question. So the second question is, what is object and class in Java? Okay, since these two are often used interchangeably in Java, so what is object and what is class in Java? So you can divide this question in two parts. One, you try to answer what is the class in Java, and then you can define what is object in Java. So the first part is what is class in Java. Let us try to understand. A class is basically a blueprint or template for creating the objects in Java, right? You write a class, you write a constructor, and based on that constructor, you create the objects. So that's the first point is about. Second point is it defines the structure and the behavior of the object that class will have, right? So basically, once you create an object, that object actually contains all the structure and behavior of the classes, right? Third point about classes is in the class, you can define attribute that is fields or variables to represent the data, okay, that object of the class will hold, right? And you can also define methods, function to specify the action or behavior of the object of the class, right? So basically, what the third point means is in the classes, we can define the methods and the variables, okay? And the object that you create of the class will actually utilize those behaviors or methods or variables to perform some task, okay? The fourth point about class is a class serves as a blueprint for creating multiple instances of the object that share same structure and behavior. What does this mean? So let us say if the class is not singleton, you can create multiple objects, right, of the same class. And then the object of that class will contain the same structure as defined in the class, right? So you can say object is a subset of the class. The last point about class is classes are defined using the class keyword followed by the class name, right? You define a class A, right? So class is a keyword in Java and A is the name of the class. Now, when it comes to object, let us try to understand what is object. So object is an instance of the class. We already discussed, right? So while defining the object, you can say object is a instance of the class. It represents real world entity based on the class blueprint, right? Objects are created from the classes and have their own unique data and state, right? So to understand the second point, that objects are created from the class and have their own unique data and state. What does this mean? Let us say you are creating the object of a class and there is a two variables inside the class, and you are creating the object using the constructor. I mean, every time we create object using the constructor, but we can say this time we are trying to create the object using the parameterized constructor, which means let us say there is a class, and in the class A we have int id and a string name. So whenever you are creating the object, you will provide what class a small a equal to new a, and in that argument you will provide id, that is one, and name, that is something maybe Techie, right? So that's what second point means. They can call, third point is they can call the method defined in the class to perform specific action, right? So basically it is saying that if you define any method in the class for any task, the objects can call those methods to perform certain tasks, right? That is the third point about object in Java. So the fourth point about object is objects encapsulate both data, that is attribute, and behavior, that is method, right? So object is a kind of encapsulation of attributes and behavior of the classes, right? The last point about object is to create an object, we use the new keyword followed by the class constructor, right? So it could be a default constructor, that is also called as non-parameterized constructor or parameterized constructor. So that's all about object and classes in Java. While answering questions in the interview, you can choose three or rather 2 points of these. You don't need to say all the 4 or 5 points that I have written. This is just to give an idea what all you can say when there is a question about what is object and class in Java. Okay, let's move to the third question. So the third question is Java a fully object-oriented programming language? So let us say how to answer this question. So you can say Java is often described as mostly object-oriented programming language, not the fully object-oriented programming language. And the reason for that, I already told you that we have the variables in Java. Okay. The second point about whether Java is a fully object-oriented programming language or not, this distinctions arise from some feature in Java that don't strictly adhere to the purest interpretation of the object-oriented principle. What does this mean? There are few points which doesn't actually adhere to the purest interpretation of the object-oriented principle. What is the purest interpretation of the object-oriented principle? It is basically that everything in a programming language is an object. If everything in programming language is object, then you can say that one is a fully object-oriented programming language. Now, what are the problem with the Java? First one is variables. So Java non-object oriented features, you can say there are primitive data types, that is variables. So Java include primitive data types like int, double char, that are not objects. These types are not part of the object hierarchy, right? And the second point is static. This point is always missed by the people, whoever you ask, like why Java is not object oriented programming language. So the second point is very important, and if you say this in the interview, it will carry most weightage because primitive data type everybody say. But if you say the static members, it will add more value because static members are associated with the class. It is not associated with the objects only, right? Because static methods can be called with the classes directly, or static variables can be called with the classes directly. That's what the second point means. Java allows the use of static methods and field which are associated with the class itself rather than with the instance of the class. This concept doesn't align with the pure notion of the object. Okay. So always remember, whether you are saying the first point or not, mention second point. That will add more value to your answer because I too take the interview in my organization and I know this static members are always missed by the people. Okay. Now let's move to the fourth question. So the fourth question is, what are four main component of the OOPS? If you are asked this question in the interview, what you should be doing? You should be answering in a way that it should not be too long. Okay, because this question will be followed up with the one more or two more questions. Okay, so the four main component of the OOPS, you can say like abstraction, encapsulation, polymorphism, and inheritance, right? And these four when you try to name these food, just add one line. Not required to add the entire definition and entire example. Okay. So to answer this question, you can say there are the four main principle or the concept of OOPS in Java is inheritance, polymorphism, encapsulation, and abstraction. And then you say one line each for these four. So you can say inheritance, Java support inheritance, allowing one class, that is subclass, to inherit properties and behavior of the another class, that is called superclass. That's it. You don't need to go further on this. Okay. Then you define the second point, that is polymorphism. Java allows for the polymorphism through the method overriding and method overloading, enabling objects of different type to be treated as the object of the common principle. Now, if you observe, I have added two keywords here, right? Method overloading and method overriding. So most probably you will be asked a question on the method overriding and method overloading. Always remember, when you are giving the interview, you can mold your interview to a direction which you want rather than doing what interviewer wants. Okay. So you just have to be a bit smart on this. Okay. Now the third point that we need to say, that encapsulation in Java basically provides the controlled visibility of the classes and the members of the classes, promoting the encapsulation. And how does encapsulation does this? With the help of access modifier called, there are multiple access modifier like public, private, protected, right? And the default. Now the last point that you can say about what are the four main component of the OOPS is abstraction. So Java support abstraction through the abstract classes and interfaces, which defines a common set of methods without providing concrete implementation. Okay. Now, if you see this answer, you will find out there are subclasses, superclasses, there are polymorphism, method overloading, method overriding, there are access modifier, and there are classes and interfaces. Okay. So mostly you will be asked question about this, and every interviewer have a limited time. Okay. We take the interview. I mean, I take the interview in my organization. I know we are given half an hour or sometimes 1 hour to take the interview. And if you use this trick, mostly question will come from this and certain times will be passed. And the purpose of any interview is to get selected, right? So this will help. Okay, let's move to the next question. The next question is, what is abstraction in Java? Explain with the example. Okay, you can define abstraction in following way. Abstraction in Java is one of the four fundamental principles of the object-oriented programming. It refers to the concept of simplifying complex reality by modeling classes into the essential properties and behavior they share while hiding the unnecessary details. Okay, so what does this mean? It simply means that, let us say you are going to ATM. If you have not seen my video about abstraction, you can go back and watch for the detailed understanding of abstraction. But while answering in an interview, you can say, like, let us say you are going to ATM, you are trying to withdraw some cash, right? You entered your ATM card and you entered your PIN. Now you get the cash, right? If the PIN is correct. But in the background, whenever you enter your card, it is read by the ATM machine. Then it connects with the bank server. It try to verify your details. It try to verify your PIN number that you just entered to withdraw the cash, right? So those things you don't know how it is happening in the background. Okay. So it hide the complex reality and always provide the essential things that you actually need to know, like whether your cash is coming out or there is a problem in the ATM machine and it is not dispersing any cash. So those kind of things will be shown to you, but it will not show you the complex implementation of that ATM machine. Okay. Third point about abstraction is, abstraction allows you to create abstract classes and interfaces to define a common set of methods without providing concrete implementation. So we achieve abstraction through the abstract classes or interfaces, right? If you have written any web application, you already know, right? We always, even for the service or the for the service layer or the DAO layer, we always write the interface, and we provide the multiple implementation wherever or what rather whatever is required. Okay, now let's move to the next question. The next question is, what is encapsulation in Java? Okay, so in this question, interviewer actually wants to know your understanding of the encapsulation. So the best example of the encapsulation is a class. You can take example of a class. Classes actually encapsulates every attribute and behavior of that particular class and make it a class, right? So let us see how we can define encapsulation. Also, every topic that I'm explaining here, every question that is coming here, a detailed video is available on the channel. Okay, so you can go and watch that video whenever you find a free time. Okay, so to define encapsulation, you can say encapsulation in Java refers to the practice of bundling data, that is attribute or properties, and methods that operates on the data into a single unit called class. That's what I told you. The best example of encapsulation is a class. It actually binds the attributes and behavior into one unit, and that unit is basically called as a class, right? The primary goal of encapsulation is to hide the internal details of the class and provide controlled access to its attribute and behavior. Now, what is the does the second point means? The second point means, let us say you are writing a class and there are setters and getters. Let's say there is a attribute called age. Now you don't want anyone to set a negative age, right? So in the setter method, you can apply a filter or rather a condition. If the age is greater than 0, then only you apply, you set the method. Otherwise, you return a message that your age is not valid, right? You can do that in setter method. So that's what it means. In the second point, the primary goal of encapsulation is to hide the internal details of the class and provide controlled access to its attribute and behavior. The key aspect of encapsulation in Java is access modifier. That's what I told you. Java provides access modifier like private, protected, default, and public to control the visibility and accessibility of the class members, like attribute and methods. Let us say you define a variable there, making it a private, or you find a method there, making it a private. Then the private method or variable will be accessed only in that class, right? And these modifiers defines who can access the member from outside the class, right? Or if you make it the protected, it will be accessed only in the subclasses of the same package, right? That's how access modifier works. On the access modifier, I'll make a separate video to make you understand. But yeah, this is related to encapsulation, so I mentioned it here. Okay. And there are getters and setters. I already explained you this. If you remember, I told you that if there is a age and someone is trying to set the negative age, then you can provide a condition in the setter method, right? And then you can either set the data if the data is correct or return a message if the data is not correct, right? So the first point about getters and setters is to provide controlled access to the private attributes. Java classes often include public methods known as getters and setters. Getters retrieve the value of an attribute while setters allows the modification of its value. These methods encapsulate the data and enforce validation rules if necessary. The last point is enforce validation rules if necessary. Is the same that I told you about the age. Let's move to the next question. So the next question is, what is inheritance in Java? So whenever interviewer is asking you inheritance in Java, they want to hear two things. One is whether what kind of relation it whether it is a relationship or has a relationship. Okay. And the second thing is how inheritance is beneficial. Okay. So let's try to see how we should answer this question. Okay. So the first point about inheritance in Java is inheritance in Java is the core concept of the object-oriented programming language. It allows us to create new classes, or we can say it subclasses or derived classes based on the existing class that we call as superclass or base class. Okay. Inheritance enables the subclasses to inherit the properties, fields, variables, behaviors, okay, or methods of the superclass, thereby promoting code reusability and establishing a hierarchical relationship between the classes. Okay, that's the thing that you need to say about the inheritance in Java. And the next point that is very important about inheritance, whenever you are answering this question in the interview, you should be saying this, that there are two things in the inheritance, that is subclass and superclass. The class that is being inherited from is called superclass, while the class that inherits from superclass is called subclass. The subclass extends the superclass. Okay. And the next point you can say inheritance represents is a relationship between the classes. Okay, that is very important. It implies that the subclass is the specialized version of the superclass. For example, if you have a superclass vehicle, you can write subclasses like car, truck, bike, and these all are types of the vehicle, right? So it is representing is a relationship. Okay. And there is another thing called super keyword that is associated with this. So you can say the super keyword is used in the subclasses to access the member of the superclass. It is basically used in the subclass constructor to invoke the constructor of the superclass. Basically in the subclass constructor, super is a default keyword written, okay, which calls the subclass superclass constructor. So that's why whenever you create the object of the subclass, it creates the object of the superclass also. So the last point is it is often used to call the superclass constructor or to explicitly reference superclass members when they are shadowed by the members in the subclass. Okay, let us say you have variable int a in the subclass and variable int b in the superclass. So which one, let us say you are trying to print a. So which one you are trying to print? Let us say you are trying to print superclass variable, but since you are in subclass, it will always give a preference to the subclass variable a. Now, if you want to use the superclass variable a, you can simply write super dot a. That will call the variable of the superclass. That's what last point means. Okay. Now let us move to the next question. So the next question in this series is multiple inheritance in Java supported or not? If not, then why? You have to give the reason. First answer it if it is supported in Java, and if not supported, then why? So multiple inheritance in Java is supported through the interfaces and not supported through the classes. So let's see how we can answer this question. Okay. So the first point about whether it is supported or not, you can say no, Java doesn't support multiple inheritance for classes, and this design choice is intentional. So the choice that we have, like the Java will not support the multiple inheritance with the classes, this is intentionally made by the Java people. Okay. The second point you can say here is multiple inheritance refers to a situation where a class inherits property and behavior from more than one superclasses. Okay. And Java doesn't support multiple inheritance with the classes. Okay. And why it is not supporting, I'll tell you in the next line. So the third point you can say Java does support multiple inheritance, but only with the interfaces. The next line, why it doesn't support multiple inheritance with the classes, you can see it can cause a diamond problem. Okay. What is a diamond problem? So let us say there is a class A and it is extending class B and class C, and then there is class A that is being extended by class D and class E. So this kind of situation is called diamond problem. Okay. Now let us say you are trying to access something in the class A, then and let us say the same method is available in class B and class C, then you don't know which method to call. That will cause ambiguity. That's why we don't support multiple inheritance in the classes. So the first one is diamond problem. Multiple inheritance can lead to a situation known as diamond problem. This occurs when a class inherits from two classes that have common method or attribute name. Okay, that's what I told you. If it has a common method or attribute name, it will get confused which one to call if it is available in both the superclasses. Okay. Resolving the ambiguity of which methods or attribute use becomes challenging in such cases, right? So whenever you are answering the question about multiple inheritance, always mention this diamond problem. Okay. Otherwise, this question can come in a different way. Like, can you explain the diamond problem? So then the answer is going to be same. It is not going to change. Okay. The next point about complexity. Why Java doesn't support multiple inheritance with the classes? The next point is complexity. Multiple inheritance can make code more complex or harder to understand, maintain, and debug. It can lead to issue related to methods and attribute conflict and can increase the likelihood of bugs. That's what I told you. It will increase the complexity of the code, and it will be difficult to understand like which method is being called if the same method is available in both the superclasses which is being extended. Okay. The last point is lack of clarity. It's kind of abbreviation of the second point, that in multiple inheritance scenario it may not always be clear which superclass should take precedence or when a conflict arises, right? This lack of clarity can make the code less predictable. Okay. Now let us move to the next question. So the next question is, what is polymorphism in Java? Okay. So what is polymorphism in Java? To answer this question, you can say polymorphism basically derives from two words, poly and morphic. Poly means many and morphic means behavior. So basically polymorphism means many behavior. Okay. And the second point for polymorphism in Java is polymorphism in Java refers to the ability of objects of different classes to be treated as object of a common superclass. Polymorphism allows you to write a code that can work with the objects of various types in the more generic way, making your code more flexible and extensible. Okay. So basically polymorphism is many behavior from the same objects or other same method in the different situation. Okay. And there are two main type of polymorphism in Java, that is static polymorphism or compile time polymorphism and runtime polymorphism. So you don't need to explain these two while explaining the polymorphism in Java, because the next question that interviewer will ask is, what is compile time polymorphism or what is runtime polymorphism? Can you explain? Okay, so that question will already be coming. So don't explain this in this type of question where they are asking only what is polymorphism in Java. Okay, so let us move to the next question. So the next question is, what is static and dynamic polymorphism in Java? Okay, so to define this, you can say static polymorphism is a polymorphism when the method calls are resolved at the compile time, or the polymorphic behavior of the object is known at compile time. And to oppose it to this, Dynamic polymorphism occurs when the method calls are not resolved at compile time, rather it resolved at the runtime. Or you can say if the polymorphic behavior of a method is known at runtime, then you can say it is a dynamic polymorphism. Okay, now let's have a look on this. First, let us see compile time polymorphism. In compile time polymorphism, you can say compile time polymorphism is also known as static polymorphism, and this type of polymorphism is resolved at the compile time. It occurs when two or more methods in the same class have the same name but different parameter, like in method overloading. You are already here giving a hint that ask me method overloading. Okay. The second point about compiling polymorphism is the appropriate method to call is determined based on the method signature and an argument specified at the compile time. Okay, which means method calls are getting resolved at the compile time itself, and the polymorphic behavior of the method is known to the JVM at the compile time. Okay, that's why it is called compile time polymorphism. Contrary to this, in runtime polymorphism, the first point is this type of polymorphism is resolved at runtime. It occurs when a subclass provides a specific implementation for a method that is already defined in its superclass. That is called method overriding. So you gave here a hint that asked me method overriding, okay, to the interview. So the second point about runtime polymorphism is the decision about which method to call is made dynamically based on the actual object type present in the class reference at the runtime. Okay, so basically to define the runtime polymorphism, you can say if the polymorphic behavior of the object is known at runtime, then it is known as runtime polymorphism. And if, or rather you can say, if the method calls are resolved at runtime, then it is called as runtime polymorphism in Java. Okay, so that's all for today. If you want the notes shown in this video, please do comment your email ID and you will receive this within 24 hours. Also, I'll be posting more such informative video on this channel. So if you found this video helpful, please do like, share and subscribe. Thank you. Bye bye. Take care.